Every organization is running on decisions that were never made. The standard explanation is complexity. The operation grew, the market shifted, the team is stretched. Senior judgment is required at every turn because the environment demands it. This is a comfortable diagnosis. It protects the leader from a harder one. Complexity does not explain why the same three issues resurface in every leadership meeting for 6 months. It does not explain why a problem that was handled in Q1 reappears in Q3 wearing a different name. And it does not explain why a senior leader spends Thursday resolving a conflict that exists only because no one defined the boundary between two departments when the second one was created. Those are not symptoms of a complex environment. They are symptoms of structural decisions that were never made. Decisions that were deferred, delegated to no one, or replaced with a workaround that became permanent before anyone noticed. That accumulation has a name. It is decision debt. Decision debt works the way financial debt works. A deferred structural call does not sit idle. It generates cost every day it remains unresolved. The director who is never told what she is authorized to decide. The threshold between two departments that was never drawn. The role that was filled without defining its decision rights. Each one is a deferred decision. Each one generates a recurring cost, an escalation, a duplicated effort, a meeting to negotiate a boundary that should have been defined once and embedded in process. The organization added headcount without adding authority. The salary is real. The leverage is not. Not every deferral is debt. There is such a thing as a deliberate hold. The structural call that waits because the information required to make it well does not yet exist. That is not debt. That is discipline. Decision debt is different. It is the deferral that happens not because the decision needs more time, but because the decision is uncomfortable, ambiguous, or belongs to a conversation no one is willing to have. The deferred with intent decision sits in escrow. The deferred by default decision accrues interest. The pattern scales beyond any single organization. Boeing did not intend to build a catastrophic design flaw into the 737 MAX. They deferred a structural decision, redesigned the airframe, and replaced it with a software patch. Each subsequent deferral compounded the first. A second sensor was cut. The authority limit was expanded. The system was hidden from pilot manuals to avoid triggering retraining. No single decision was irrational. The accumulation was fatal. Starbucks did not intend to commoditize its own brand. They deferred a different structural decision, define what cannot be sacrificed for scale, and replaced it with a sequence of efficiency gains. Automatic machines over handcrafted espresso, standardized interiors over neighborhood design, mobile order pipelines that turn the barista from craftsman to fulfillment node, drive-through priority that shifted the store's center of gravity from the third place to a transaction window. Each decision was individually rational. The sum bankrupted the experience that made the brand worth scaling in the first place. The cost compounds in two directions, and the second one is worse. The first is operational. The recurring escalations, the stalled initiatives, the alignment meetings that exist because a boundary was never defined. These are interest payments. They show up on the calendar every week, not because the issues are new, but because the underlying boundary has never been drawn. The second is structural. Decision debt does not just slow the current operation. It degrades the organization's capacity to make future decisions. Every deferred structural call creates ambiguity. Ambiguity does not stay ambiguous. It hardens into precedent. People make decisions inside the undefined boundary, and each one treats the absence of a structural call as settled context. A workaround becomes a process. A process becomes a norm. A norm becomes the way things are done. And no one remembers it started as a gap that nobody filled. 2 years later, the organization is not just missing a decision. It has built an entire operating layer on top of the assumption that no decision was needed. The debt is no longer a deferred call. It is architecture, load-bearing architecture that was never designed, only accumulated. Paying down that principal requires more than making the decision that was deferred. It requires dismantling the infrastructure that formed around the vacancy. That is why decision debt compounds. The longer it sits, the more expensive the structural call becomes. Not because the decision got harder, but because the organization built on top of the gap. By the time the original decision is finally made, it is no longer the only decision required. It is the first of many. Most executives, when they sense this drag, reach for execution. They tighten accountability. They add reporting cadence. They run the operation harder. This does not reduce the debt. It services it. The leader is making interest payments, absorbing the escalations, resolving the conflicts, bridging the gaps, without ever touching the principal. Servicing debt feels productive. The meetings happen, the conflicts get resolved, but the conditions that generated them remain intact. Next week, the same volume returns. The leader is not solving the problem. They are renting a temporary absence of symptoms. The question is not whether you are working hard enough. The question is whether the decisions generating your workload were ever made at all. You are not behind on execution. You are current on a debt that no one is tracking.